Dr. Elena Santos stood at the observation deck of the Ganymede Research Station, her breath fogging the reinforced glass as she watched Jupiter's swirling storms in the distance. The gas giant's eternal tempest seemed fitting given the storm brewing in her own mind. Behind her, holographic displays flickered with data that shouldn't have been possible. "Run it again," she commanded, her voice steady despite the implications of what they'd found. The AI complied, and once more the simulation played out. Alien vessels, massive beyond comprehension, moving through space in perfect geometric formations. But it wasn't their size or number that had caught Elena's attention. It was their behavior. The ships adjusted their course with impossible precision, maintaining exact distances between each other, like a crystalline lattice floating through space. As they passed through an asteroid field, they didn't dodge the rocks. Instead, they systematically vaporized them, creating a perfectly clear corridor of exact specifications. Dr. Santos, her assistant, Kai Chen, entered the observation deck, tablet in hand. "The quantum analysis results are in. You're going to want to see this." Elena turned from the window, her dark eyes reflecting the holographic glow. The data Kai presented confirmed what she'd suspected. These weren't just ships. They were organisms. The entire fleet, Kai explained. It's a single superorganism. Each ship is like a cell in a larger body, maintaining perfect homeostasis. They're not just coordinated, they're connected. Elena's mind raced through the implications. For decades, humanity had wondered if they were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer, but it wasn't what anyone had expected. These beings, these Symmetrians, as her team had dubbed them, weren't just alien. They were the antithesis of everything that made life on Earth unique. "Look at how they respond to spatial anomalies." She pointed to a particular sequence in the data. "They don't adapt to their environment. They transform it. Every space they move through becomes identical to the last. Like they're terraforming space itself," Kai whispered. The revelation had come too late. The Symmetrian fleet had already passed Mars' orbit, systematically eliminating the automated defense platforms humanity had placed throughout the solar system. Each platform had been destroyed not because it posed a threat, but because it disrupted the perfect spatial symmetry the aliens demanded. Elena pulled up the analysis of Earth's varied ecosystems, the chaotic, beautiful mess of evolution that had produced humanity. "They're going to try to perfect us," she said, the horror of the realization settling in. "They won't just invade. They'll try to remake everything in their image." A priority message flashed across her screens. It was from Dr. James Morrison, her colleague at the Lunar Biology Institute. "Elena, we've cracked their biology. You need to see this immediately." The transmission that followed changed everything. The Symmetrian's cellular structure was unlike anything seen before, each cell a perfect replica of the next, with no variation, no mutation, no ability to adapt. They had engineered themselves into a state of perceived perfection, eliminating all biological redundancies and variation. "They've evolved past evolution itself," Elena murmured, a plan already forming in her mind. She turned to Kai, her expression intense. "Get me a secure line to the Defense Council, and I need access to the Earth's genome database, all of it." "What are you thinking?" Kai asked, already moving to comply. "They've made themselves perfect," Elena said, a grim smile forming on her face. "But perfection is stagnation. And stagnation, in a universe of constant change, is extinction waiting to happen." As she prepared her presentation for the Defense Council, Elena thought about Earth's history, about how life had survived 5 mass extinctions, countless climate changes, and perpetual competition. Humanity's ancestors hadn't survived because they were perfect. They'd survived because they could adapt, because they embraced change. The Symmetrians were approaching with the intention of perfecting humanity, of eliminating what they saw as chaos and disorder. But in doing so, they had revealed their fundamental weakness. They could not handle variation. They could not adapt to change. And Earth, with its countless ecosystems, its millions of species, and its billions of years of evolutionary history, was the most changeable place they could have chosen to attack. As the emergency beacon lit up her console, signaling the Defense Council was ready for her briefing, Elena felt a surge of hope. The Symmetrians thought they were coming to perfect humanity. Instead, they were about to learn why imperfection, the ability to change, to adapt, to evolve, was the greatest strength of all. Kai, she called as she gathered her data, contact the bioengineering department. Tell them to prepare for Project Genesis. It's time to show our visitors why Earth's chaotic evolution produced something far more powerful than their perfect order ever could. The stars seemed to shimmer through the observation window, and somewhere out there, a fleet of perfect beings was approaching, unaware that they were about to face an enemy that thrived on the very chaos they had engineered out of themselves. Humanity's greatest weakness, in this moment, would become its greatest strength. The underground laboratory beneath the Atacama Desert hummed with activity as Dr. Elena Santos studied the holographic display before her. 3 months had passed since the discovery of the Symmetrians' weakness, and humanity had been working tirelessly to exploit it. "Show me test subject Delta's response to the environmental shift," she commanded. The hologram flickered, displaying a human cell cluster suspended in a containment field. As they watched, the temperature dropped rapidly, and the cells began to change. Unlike normal human cells that would struggle and die, these shifted their molecular structure, adapting in real time to the freezing conditions. "Remarkable," Dr. Morrison commented from his workstation. "The synthetic chromosomes are performing exactly as designed. Complete cellular reorganization in under 30 seconds. Project Chameleon had been born from a desperate idea. If the Symmetrians couldn't handle change, then humanity would become change incarnate. Using breakthrough technologies in synthetic biology and quantum computing, they had created artificial chromosomes that could be activated at will, allowing human cells to rapidly adapt to extreme conditions." "How are the test subjects handling the neural integration?" Elena asked, turning to Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their head of neuroscience. Yuki brought up another display, showing brain scans of the volunteers. "Better than expected. The quantum neural interface allows conscious control over the adaptive responses. They're not just surviving in extreme environments, they're thriving." The implications were staggering. They had created humans who could consciously control their own evolution, adapting to any environment in minutes rather than generations. It was the ultimate expression of humanity's greatest strength, the ability to change. An alarm blared through the facility, and Colonel Sarah Chen burst into the laboratory. "The Symmetrians have breached the Kuiper Belt defense line," she announced, her face grim. "They'll reach Earth in less than 2 weeks." Elena nodded, having expected this news. "How many volunteers are ready?" 300 have successfully integrated with the Chameleon system," Sarah replied. "Another 500 are in final training." The plan was audacious. Instead of trying to fight the Symmetrians directly, they would allow themselves to be captured. The aliens' obsession with studying inferior life forms would be their undoing. "Show me the latest simulation," Elena requested. The hologram shifted, displaying a Symmetrian vessel's internal environment. The aliens maintained their ships at perfect, unchanging conditions, which made them perfect incubators for what humanity had planned. Dr. Morrison pulled up the biological data. The synthetic adaptive genes are stable and undetectable to their scanning technology. Once our people are inside their ships, the genes can be activated remotely. Each volunteer will become a vector for controlled environmental chaos. Not just chaos, Elena corrected. Evolution itself. They had discovered that the Symmetrians' perfect biology was maintained by complex environmental control systems. By introducing rapidly adapting human cells into their closed ecosystem, they would force the aliens to confront something they had engineered out of their society: change. A young lieutenant entered the lab, carrying the secure tablet. "Dr. Santos, the Defense Council is requesting an update. They want to know if we're ready." Elena looked around the laboratory at her team. The best minds humanity had to offer, working together to turn their species' perceived weakness into the ultimate weapon. The test results were clear. Project Chameleon was a success. Their volunteers could now adapt to temperatures from near absolute zero to volcanic heat, survive in vacuum or under crushing pressure, and even restructure their biology to process alien atmospheres. "Tell them we're ready," she said. "But I want to address the volunteers first." Minutes later, Elena stood before the assembled group of volunteers, soldiers, scientists, and civilians who had stepped forward to become humanity's secret weapon. Their bodies now contained humanity's greatest scientific achievement, the power to direct their own evolution. "What we're asking of you is unprecedented," she began. "You'll be carrying not just our technology, but the very essence of what makes humanity strong, our ability to adapt, to change, to evolve. The Symmetrians believe their perfection makes them invincible. They've created a society without variance, without adaptation, without the beautiful chaos that drives evolution. When they encounter you, they'll learn why that was their greatest mistake." The volunteers stood tall, their eyes reflecting determination. They had trained for months, learning to control their new abilities, preparing to become living vectors of change in the Symmetrians' perfect world. "Remember," Elena continued, "you're not just carrying weapons. You're carrying 4 billion years of evolutionary history. Every adaptation Earth's life has ever developed, every survival strategy life has ever attempted, now exists within your synthetic chromosomes. You are living proof that imperfection, the ability to change, to adapt, to evolve, is the greatest strength in the universe." As she looked at their faces, Elena saw not fear but resolve. These brave individuals would allow themselves to be captured, would enter the perfect, sterile world of the Symmetrians, and would show them why life on Earth had survived everything the universe had thrown at it. The quantum displays behind her showed the Symmetrian fleet's approach, their ships maintaining their perfect formation as they moved inexorably toward Earth. They thought they were coming to perfect humanity, to eliminate what they saw as biological chaos. Instead, they were about to encounter an enemy unlike any they had faced before. An enemy that could adapt faster than they could impose order, that could change faster than they could establish control, that could evolve in real time to counter any perfect system they created. "Humanity's greatest strength," Elena concluded, "has always been our imperfection, our messy, chaotic, beautiful ability to change. Now, we're going to show the universe why evolution will always triumph over perfection." The assembled volunteers saluted, ready to become the agents of controlled chaos that would shatter the Symmetrians' perfect world. As Elena watched them file out to their assigned positions, she knew that the real test was about to begin. The question wasn't whether humanity could survive the Symmetrians' attempt at perfection. It was whether the Symmetrians could survive humanity's embrace of change backslash. Captain Maya Rodriguez drifted in the void, her disabled shuttle spinning slowly against the backdrop of stars. Around her, 11 other decoy vessels floated in similar states of apparent distress, their emergency beacons broadcasting carefully crafted distress signals. Inside her specialized survival suit, Maya's enhanced biology remained calm despite the extreme conditions. "Target vessels approaching," the AI whispered in her ear. 3 minutes to intercept." Through her viewport, she watched as the Symmetrian ships emerged from the darkness. They moved with mathematical precision, their crystalline hulls reflecting starlight in perfect patterns. The sight was beautiful in its uniformity, and terrifying in its implications. "Remember," Dr. Santos' voice came through the secure quantum channel. "Once inside, wait for total distribution before activation. We only get one chance at this." Maya checked her neural interface, confirming the synthetic chromosomes were dormant but ready. Her body, like those of all the volunteers, had been transformed into a delivery system for controlled evolutionary chaos. The Symmetrians' own protocols would do the rest. The massive alien ship loomed above her shuttle, its perfect geometric form blocking out the stars. A beam of pure white light engulfed her vessel, and Maya felt the familiar tingle of a molecular transport field. The Symmetrians, true to their nature, wouldn't risk contaminating their environment with a physical docking. She materialized in a pristine white chamber, her suit's sensors immediately cataloging the environment. Temperature, pressure, atmospheric composition. Everything was maintained at mathematically optimal levels. The chamber itself seemed to pulse with a subtle rhythm, its walls lined with crystalline structures that were both technological and organic. Two Symmetrians approached her containment field. Their bodies were as perfect as their ships, crystalline humanoids with symmetrical features and identical proportions. They moved in perfect synchronization, their steps measured and precise. Fascinating. One spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of tones. The imperfect one shows no fear. Maya remained silent as they began their standard examination protocols. Their scanners passed over her repeatedly, recording every detail of her primitive biology. Just as Elena had predicted, their curiosity about less evolved life forms overrode any security concerns. Hours passed as more humans were brought aboard. Maya caught glimpses of other volunteers being processed through adjacent chambers. The Symmetrians followed the exact same procedures with each capture, their actions as predictable as their ship's environmental controls. Distribution at 60%. The AI updated in her ear. Prepare for Phase 2. Maya watched as the Symmetrians continued their methodical study. They were so focused on analyzing what they perceived as biological imperfections that they failed to notice the subtle changes already beginning in their perfect environment. The synthetic chromosomes in each human cells were releasing microscopic spores, engineered organisms that could survive in the ship's filtration systems. Distribution at 90%, the AI announced. Stand by for activation. The Symmetrians had just begun another scan when Maya received the signal. With a thought, she activated her synthetic chromosomes. The change was immediate and dramatic. Her cells began rapidly adapting to the ship's environment, but not in a way the Symmetrians could predict or control. The crystalline aliens recoiled as their sensors detected the sudden shift. Impossible, one stated, its harmonic voice showing the first signs of discord. The specimen is changing. Around her, Maya knew the other volunteers were doing the same. Each human had become a vector for controlled evolutionary adaptation, their cells releasing enzymes and organisms that would force the Symmetrian's perfect environment to face something it had never encountered: rapid, unpredictable change. Alarms began to sound, not the harsh klaxons of human ships, but a discordant symphony of tones that spoke of growing disorder in the Symmetrian's perfect systems. The crystalline walls of the chamber began to show the first signs of asymmetrical patterns as the engineered organisms took hold. The containment fields, a Symmetrian called out, its movements becoming erratic. They're adapting to our frequencies. Maya felt a surge of triumph as the energy field around her flickered and died. The Symmetrians' perfect environmental controls were failing as they encountered something they had engineered out of their existence: the need to adapt to unexpected changes. All volunteers, Dr. Santos's voice came through clearly now that the containment fields were down. Proceed to Phase 3. Show them why Earth's life has survived 5 mass extinctions. Maya began to move, her enhanced biology allowing her to navigate the rapidly changing environment of the ship. Around her, other volunteers were doing the same, each one becoming a mobile epicenter of evolutionary adaptation. The Symmetrian's perfect order was being disrupted not by weapons or violence, but by the most fundamental force in the universe: change itself. The crystalline aliens were retreating now, their perfect formations breaking down as they encountered situations their rigid biology couldn't process. Their ships, designed to maintain absolute consistency, were being forced to deal with thousands of rapid, small-scale environmental changes simultaneously. They're trying to vent the sections, someone reported over the comm. But the organisms are already in their systems. They can't purge what's already becoming part of their ecosystem. Maya watched as the perfect crystalline walls began to develop irregular patterns, the engineered organisms forcing the very structure of the ship to adapt or break. The Symmetrians had created an environment of perfect stasis, but in doing so, they had lost the ability to handle the dynamic nature of life itself. First strike successful, Dr. Santos announced across all channels. The infection of chaos has begun. Now let's show them why evolution always wins. As Maya continued through the transforming ship, she couldn't help but smile. The Symmetrians had spent millennia engineering the chaos out of their existence, creating a perfect, unchanging state of being. But they were about to learn why Earth's messy, chaotic, ever-changing biosphere had produced beings capable of surviving anything the universe threw at them. The perfect order of the Symmetrians was about to face its greatest challenge, a species that had turned adaptation itself into a weapon. The command center beneath the Atacama Desert had transformed into a symphony of chaos. Dr. Elena Santos watched as hundreds of holographic displays tracked the spread of their evolutionary weapon through the Symmetrian fleet. Each point of light represented a volunteer, a living catalyst of change in the aliens' perfect world. The primary carrier ships are showing significant environmental fluctuations, Dr. Morrison reported, his fingers dancing across quantum interfaces. Their attempts to maintain homeostasis are failing across all sectors. The data streams told an extraordinary story. The Symmetrian ships, once models of perfect order, were experiencing cascading changes they couldn't control. The engineered organisms released by the volunteers weren't just surviving. They were thriving, forcing adaptation at a pace the aliens had never encountered. They're trying to isolate the affected sections, Yuki announced, studying neural feedback from the volunteers. But they don't understand what they're fighting. Every attempt to restore order just creates new opportunities for adaptation. Elena nodded, watching as the perfect geometric formations of the Symmetrian fleet began to break down. Their strategy was working better than they had dared to hope. The aliens' rigid biology and inflexible systems were proving to be fatal weaknesses in the face of engineered evolution. A new alert flashed across the main display. Multiple ships are attempting emergency purges, Colonel Chen reported. They're trying to eliminate all biological material from the affected areas. Let them try, Elena smiled grimly. The organisms we engineered don't just adapt, they learn. Each attempt to eliminate them only forces them to evolve new survival strategies. The quantum feeds showed the truth of her words. The Symmetrians' perfect environmental systems, designed to maintain absolute consistency, were becoming breeding grounds for rapid evolution. Every countermeasure they attempted simply created new selective pressures, driving the engineered organisms to develop in ways even Elena's team hadn't predicted. Dr. Santos, a young analyst, called out, "We're detecting unusual activity in the flagship. Their central coordination appears to be breaking down." The holographic display zoomed in on the massive vessel at the heart of the Symmetrian fleet. Its crystalline surface, once a perfect geometric lattice, now showed spreading patterns of asymmetry. The aliens' obsession with order had left them vulnerable to the most fundamental force in nature, the pressure to adapt or die. "They're trying to communicate," Morrison announced suddenly, broadcasting on all frequencies. The message that came through was unlike anything they had heard before from the Symmetrians. Gone was the harmonic perfection of their usual communications, replaced by discordant tones that spoke of growing disorder. "This is impossible," the alien voice declared. "You corrupt perfection itself. Your chaos spreads like a disease." Elena leaned forward, activating the communication channel. "No," she responded. "We're showing you why perfection is a dead end. Life isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to change, to adapt, to evolve." The response came back fragmented, as if the very concept of imperfection was disrupting the Symmetrians' ability to communicate. "We achieved perfection. We eliminated the need for change. And in doing so, you engineered your own extinction," Elena countered. "Look at your ships now. Look at how they're changing. That's not corruption. That's life finding a way. as it always has. The displays showed the progression of their attack across the fleet. The engineered organisms weren't just surviving in the Symmetrians' perfect environments. They were reshaping them. Every surface, every system, every perfectly ordered space was becoming a laboratory for accelerated evolution. Their coordination is breaking down completely, Colonel Chen reported. The fleet is losing cohesion. Elena watched as the massive alien ships began to move independently for the first time, their perfect formation dissolving into chaos. The Symmetrians' greatest strength, their unified, perfect order, was becoming their greatest vulnerability. "They're retreating," someone announced, and indeed, the outer ships of the fleet were beginning to turn away from Earth. But Elena knew it was already too late for them. They can't retreat from what's already inside their systems, she explained to the command center staff. They made themselves dependent on perfect order, perfect predictability. Now they're facing something they can't predict or control: life itself, in all its beautiful, chaotic glory. The quantum feeds showed the progression of their victory. Ship after ship was showing signs of irreversible change as the engineered organisms continued their work. The Symmetrians' perfect environments were becoming crucibles of evolution, each attempt at restoration only accelerating the process. "We're receiving more transmissions," Morrison announced. They're asking for help. Elena felt the weight of the moment. The Symmetrians, who had seen humanity as primitive and imperfect, were now facing the truth that imperfection, the ability to change and adapt, was the greatest strength of all. "Tell them we're willing to help," she decided. "But first, they need to understand something fundamental. The universe doesn't want perfection. It wants adaptation. It wants evolution. It wants life in all its messy, chaotic, beautiful forms." As the command center staff continued their work, Elena thought about the ironies of their victory. The Symmetrians had come to perfect humanity, to eliminate what they saw as biological chaos. Instead, they had encountered a species that had turned that very chaos into a weapon, that had embraced the power of change itself. The perfect order of the Symmetrians was crumbling, not under the force of weapons, but under the relentless pressure of evolution. The same force that had shaped life on Earth for billions of years. And in their desperation to achieve perfection, they had forgotten the most important lesson of all: that life's greatest strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in never stopping the endless dance of adaptation and change. On the observation deck of the Ganymede Research Station, Dr. Elena Santos watched the transformed Symmetrian fleet through the same window where she had first observed their approach. The once perfect crystalline ships now displayed patterns of stunning complexity, fractals and spirals that spoke of life's inherent tendency toward beautiful chaos. "The last holdouts are requesting terms," Colonel Chen reported, standing beside her. "Their perfect coordination is completely broken. Each ship is evolving independently now." 3 weeks had passed since the implementation of Project Chameleon, and the results had exceeded their wildest expectations. The Symmetrians' rigid biology and inflexible systems had proven catastrophically vulnerable to engineered evolution. "Show me the latest scans," Elena requested. The holographic display materialized, revealing the extraordinary changes taking place within the alien vessels. The engineered organisms hadn't just survived, they had transformed entire ecosystems. "It's remarkable," Dr. Morrison commented, joining them at the window. "Their ships are becoming living systems. The perfect sterility they maintained for millennia has been replaced by something far more interesting." The scans showed how the originally uniform environments of the Symmetrian ships had developed into complex, interconnected ecosystems. The aliens' attempt to maintain perfect order had created an evolutionary vacuum, and nature, as it always did, had rushed to fill it. Maya Rodriguez, recently returned from her mission in the flagship, stepped forward. Her enhanced biology had already adapted back to human standard, but her eyes still held the knowledge of what she had witnessed. "They're beginning to change too," she reported. "The Symmetrians themselves, their perfect crystalline forms can't maintain stability in these new environments. Elena nodded, unsurprised. They engineered themselves for a perfect, unchanging world. But they're learning what Earth's life has known for billions of years: adapt or fade away. The quantum feeds displayed the truth of her words. The Symmetrians' rigid biology was facing its greatest challenge, an environment that demanded change. Their perfect, identical forms were showing the first signs of variation as their bodies struggled to cope with environments they could no longer control. "We're receiving a transmission from their leadership," Yuki announced. "They're different now." The communication that came through bore little resemblance to the harmonious, perfect tones they had first encountered. The voice was irregular, filled with new harmonics and variations, beautiful in its imperfection. "We understand now," the Symmetrian leader spoke. "We thought perfection was the ultimate achievement. We were wrong." Elena stepped forward. "Perfection is stagnation," she replied. "Life isn't meant to be perfect. It's meant to be adaptable." "We see this truth in our own ships now," the alien continued. "The changes, they are not corruption as we first believed. They are evolution, growth, life finding new ways to exist." The scans showed how the Symmetrian ships had become living laboratories of adaptation. The engineered organisms had triggered cascades of evolutionary change, creating new forms of life that could thrive in the interface between human and alien biology. "Your victory is complete," the Symmetrian acknowledged. "But it is not the victory we feared. You have not destroyed us. You have forced us to remember what we once were before we sought perfection." Elena smiled, recognizing the profound truth in those words. "That's why Earth's life has survived everything the universe has thrown at it. We never stopped changing, never stopped adapting. Perfection is an endpoint. Adaptation is a journey that never ends." The displays showed more Symmetrian ships arriving from deep space, drawn by the distress calls of the First Fleet. But they weren't arriving as conquerors now. They came as observers, witnesses to a transformation that they couldn't fully comprehend. "We request guidance," the Symmetrian leader said, the words clearly difficult for them to form. "Our perfect order is broken, but in its place, we see possibilities we have forgotten existed." Colonel Chen raised an eyebrow. "They want us to teach them, us imperfect beings." "Who better?" Elena replied. "We are the descendants of creatures that survived in caves and swamps, that learned to walk upright, that looked at the stars and decided to reach them. Every step was imperfect. Every change brought new challenges. But we never stopped adapting." The observation deck fell silent as they watched more Symmetrian ships arrive, their perfect formations already showing signs of variation. The engineered organisms had done more than defeat an invasion. They had reminded an ancient species of a fundamental truth, that life's greatest strength lies not in achieving perfection, but in never ceasing to change. "Tell them we accept," Elena decided. "Earth will help them rediscover what they lost in their pursuit of perfection. But first, they need to understand our most important principle." "Which is?" Maya asked. Elena turned from the window, facing her team, the scientists, soldiers, and volunteers who had helped humanity triumph not through force of arms, but through the power of adaptation itself. "That the most beautiful things in the universe aren't perfect," she said. "They're resilient. They're adaptable. They're alive in all the messy, chaotic, wonderful ways that matter. The Symmetrians sought to perfect the cosmos, but we showed them something far more valuable: why the cosmos never needed perfection in the first place." Outside the window, the transformed Symmetrian fleet hung against the backdrop of Jupiter's eternal storms, their once perfect forms now displaying the first signs of the same beautiful chaos that had shaped life on Earth. They had come to perfect humanity, but instead, humanity had reminded them of a truth as old as life itself, that in a universe of constant change, the ability to adapt was the only perfection worth having /.